Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, we are continuing on our lecture on garden, and we have been looking into the idea of garden mostly in the context of Mughal architecture. So today we'll be getting more into the tomb garden, and that is the first garden tomb that we find in South Asia, that is Humayun's tomb. So Humayun's tomb is a particular structure that we see that that houses the the tomb of Emperor Humayun, and it was built by Emperor Akbar in the 16th century. So Humayun's tomb was completed in around 1570, and we see that this is the first kind of tomb which was built at the center of this Shaharbagh garden. So as I have already shown you that there were this idea of bringing the hushed behisht plan in Persia, and then also that how this hushed behisht plan and the Shaharbagh plan, those were brought together. So the example we have looked into from Isfahan, that was from 17th century. However, that idea already was established in the Persian architecture for centuries. So what happened in the Humayun's tomb, we find that this is also perhaps the first and a major architectural project that Akbar had undertaken. And in this structure, if we see in the right side of the screen, in this structure we have this squarish garden, and the garden is also something that is walled, and then there are those gateways, right, that the gateways, those allow people into the garden. So all those trades that are already established for making a Shaharbagh garden planning, which was there in Agra, that was now being emphasized even more. Now we do not have a pathway here for not really a major pathway like this kind of entrances that we have in this side of this tomb complex. And why is that? That's because the northern end of the this end of this particular tomb complex, there flowed the river Yamuna. So the river Yamuna, which flows by the city of Agra, that is also there in the city of Delhi, and that is how we find that most of these Mughal monuments, they were situated by the most of the important and relevant Mughal monuments, we find them to be situated by the river for its high relevance in the Mughal material culture and in the everyday lives as well. So what we have here, that there is this particular this Shaharbagh planning, in which there are those water channels, the symbolic rivers, they are there and they flow to the center of this garden, and then this Shaharbagh, or this each of these parts are then further divided into smaller square units. So that is how we find that it's not just like one Shaharbagh planning that is there, but it is also the complexity that had been created within this garden structure. Now this idea of replication and multiplicity we have already discussed in when we were talking about the temples, but it is also something of high relevance. We find them in the Islamic geometric motifs, as well as in the Islamic visual as well as material forms. So why this also comes important is because there have been a long standing debate in Islam that whether to represent something that is figurative. So in terms of that, we find that there have been views on the representation of the figurative motifs are barred or not allowed in Islam, and that is the reason there are high relevance of geometry. However, we see that this view is also not absolutely correct, because we already have the Persian miniatures, we also have the Mughal miniatures, in which the images of the human beings are shown with great details. So that is also something for us to think about, that I mean it's not just the geometry and the figurative expressions, but there are more things to know about. And that is that, I mean, for a geometric motif which does not have an individualistic edge to it, we do see that, I mean, how a geometric motif, when it replicates, it has that capacity to go towards this infinity, something that we have also discussed in how there are those architectural motifs, or the motifs which are used in the religious structures, and when they replicate themselves, and there are infinite possibilities of them being replicated, and that is something that also represent the complexity of the universe. That is also something that also address the complexity of human lives, and then all the the minute aspects of the universe which are created by the Supreme God, in this context that will be Allah. So that is the reason we find why the importance of this units which can be replicated and which can make this space into this much more in a complex, almost like a miniature version of the complexity of the universe, is something that is practiced in this garden form as well. And we should not also forget that how this garden is also something that is integrally related to the idea of paradise in Islam. So that is the reason we find all these ideas are coming together, the complexity of the universe, at the same time the idea of the paradise, all of them, they come together into this garden planning. Now, apart from the garden planning and then this symbolic streams that we have here, and these water channels which were created for for recreating this Chaharbagh plan, and they all come to they all come to this, they all direct towards this central complex which is square in its ground plan, and something that is situated on a high platform. So the relevance of high platform we have already discussed in the Buddhist, in the Jain, as well as in the Hindu context. And for the tombs being situated on a high platform, not only just relate to its relevance as a place which is reserved for this revered personalities, but it is also something that we find that in a tomb complex, in the Mughal tombs or also in the other Islamic tombs, in many of those tombs we have the this one particular site to mark the grave on the ground level, and in the underground level or in the basement we have the actual grave. So for that reason there are always there is a need for having this two-storied planning on for example, if the people in Humayun's tomb, people climb up the stairs and then they walk around in this plane on the platform. On this platform inside of this tomb complex there is the grave of Humayun we find, but that is not the actual grave, that is only the symbolic grave which marks the space where Humayun's body actually rests, and that place will be there in the basement. So that is the reason there is a need for this two-storied buildings in this Islamic tombs. So on one hand it also gives it also gives priority, or it also shows their reverence for the departed soul, but also at the same time it serves this twofold function for having this one symbolic grave and one actual grave in the same complex. So with this we also find that this entire structure is then situated on this high platform, and if we look into the planning of it, then we know that here is a clear example of the Hasht Bihisht plan. So at the center there is this one octagonal unit, and alongside there are those four units here which are which all are identical, and then there are those other units. So altogether there are those 8 units around the central one. So that is how this Hasht Bihisht plan is created, or this plan of the 8 heavens is created. So this plan, as we see all these wings which sort of come out of this squarish structure, they are here. So these are the wings that we find, this are sort of projected out of this central tomb structure, and there are those 4 wings in the 4 sides, and in the central part there is this one unit or this central room where the grave of Humayun, or like the symbolic grave of Humayun is kept. Now if we see some of the architectural motifs that we have already started looking into, there is this high arched gateway or Iwan, which we have already looked into in Fatehpur Sikri, and then there are also this slightly lesser this gateways, or like slightly lesser in size, but they also are replication of this central gateway or the central Iwan that we have. There are small minarets in the corner that we have here, and then also there are this very important this chhatri structures, those are also there on the top of each of these projections or the wings. At the center we have this high imposing dome that we have here, which also came to be of high relevance in many tomb structures in Islam. Now talking about the dome, then what we find that this particular tomb structure is also covered, and then there are debates around the erecting a tomb in Islam, that if whether the tomb should be something that needs to be humble or like a tomb should be a place which shows the stature of royalty, because in some belief system we find within Islam that tomb needs to be something which is greeted by air, with rain, with sunlight, and that is the reason we also have open air tombs like the humble ones. But for the royalty or for the important people of the state, and in the in the state politics as well as in religion, we find that there are those covered tombs which almost become a space of reverence for these departed souls. So there have been this debate about whether to make these tombs grand or like there needs to be this humble tombs. So of course for the economic and political power, we do not really see the Mughal emperors, they had their tombs to be really humble, except for Aurangzeb, whose tomb is really humble as compared to all his predecessors. Now these are some of the shots of the interior that we have here from Humayun's tomb, and in Humayun's tomb we have this central space which is octagonal in its ground plan, something that is also there in this Hasht Bihisht plan that we have here. So this is something that we find that this octagonal ground plan is there, that is very evident in the interior of this of the Humayun's tomb. Now this octagonal plan has also much relevance in the Islamic belief, because it has been believed that the seat of the God or Allah is also octagonal, and also this fabled throne of King Solomon had also been considered to be this octagonal, and that is the reason this octagonal shape we find to be being replicated in many architectural forms. For example, within the tomb structures, of course within the Hasht Bihisht plan, also even later on when we see some of the fabled the thrones, for example the peacock throne and so on of Shah Jahan, even there we find this octagonal plan has been carried out. Now apart from this octagonal plan, the units and the use of the red and the yellow and white stone, like the white marble and the red and yellow sandstone, there is also another feature of this tomb complex which is of importance, and that is here we find in the left side of the image, as we can see, that the dome of this Humayun's tomb, this high imposing dome, this is actually a double dome. So what is a double dome? So double dome is something in which we have one dome here, and then on the top of that also supports the outer dome on the top of it, and that is how the outer dome is supported by this structure which lies beneath, like this one, and so there is a possibility to have these imposing high domes which on the which would not have been possible otherwise. So that is the reason what we have here, that I mean many of these imposing like really monumental tomb structures in the Mughal context, we find them to utilize this double dome structure which is highly stable, and they also give monumentality to this tomb and the other structures. So from there we also see that there are some of the other monuments and the tomb structures that came into being, and from there if we see that the Humayun's tomb is this tomb complex in which in the center of the Chahar Bagh this tomb complex was situated, then we also see there are some of the other tombs which were built in the later times, for example in the 17th century and also in the later times. So they were situated, they were sort of pushed further to the river. So one of the examples of that will be the tomb of Itimadud-Dawla, and who was the father of Nur Jahan. So actually, even though we call this tomb as Itimadud-Dawla's tomb, but here both Nur Jahan's parents, the graves of both Nur Jahan's parents are there. So after Akbar, we find that during the rule of Jahangir, Nur Jahan or Meherun-Nisa came into prominence, and she was one of the most celebrated Mughal women. So her parents were buried in Agra, and again by this in one of those riverfront gardens. And in this one we find that in this particular tomb complex, which is modest in size, however this is also a tomb which was started being built around 1630s, which was some 60-70 years later from when Humayun's tomb in Delhi was built. But here we find there was a complete shift in material, and from the use of this red and yellowish sandstone and selected use of marble, here we find that the sandstone was used for making the this high platform, and then the entire structure was made of marble. So in this one what we have that, I mean, and here in the right side we have detail of this tomb complex, in which we find that, I mean, this is perhaps the first Mughal monument or like the first Mughal tomb which was built out of complete marble, and within the marble walls we have this very intricate work that is called Parchinkari or the stone inlay work. And in stone inlay work we find that different shapes of these stones were carved and then they were inlaid onto this marble surface, and that is how this incredible amount of complexity was materialized onto this walls and onto the stone surfaces. And so in one hand, so this is the tomb structure that we have here. So the minarets in the Humayun's tomb, as we have seen, those were almost like those very narrow, thin symbolic minarets. They have become much more wider and really bulky in the tomb of Itimadud-Dawla, where we have this 4 really imposing minarets in the 4 corners of this tomb complex. And then at the center, instead of a dome, we have this tiered pavilion on the top of it, so which is also a difference from from Humayun's tomb. And as I have already said that, I mean, this is also situated within a garden and right beside the river Yamuna in Agra, in the vicinity of Agra. Now the other important part of this tomb complex, what we find there is that already from the Humayun's tomb and in Fatehpur Sikri and in the other Mughal palaces as well as in the tombs, we have this use of this incredible jali work, jali or perforation that we have here. So that is also something that is a characteristic feature of the Mughal stone work. So here in one hand we have this kind of work when we see the inlay work has been carried out with utmost care and importance. And then there is also this jalis or the perforated windows, and these perforated windows are also they are based on how these geometric shapes can replicate themselves, and how this multiplication, replication, they are carried out by, they are made into this material presence by the means of this the structures. And they are not just there for decorative purpose, but they also allow light and air inside these complexes. So as we are looking into the site like Agra and Delhi, which are in the northern Indian plains, during summer these places can get really hot. So the ventilation, the air circulation within these closed structures are also very important, and this kind of jalis are, that is the reason they are very important part of this architecture in this part of the world. Now from there we move little further, that how this structures, they have also made a huge impact on the perhaps the pinnacle of the Mughal architecture, and that is the Taj Mahal. So Taj Mahal was started being built around some 15 years later than the Itimaduddaulah's tomb, which started in around 1630, and Taj Mahal started in the mid 1640s. So what we find here, that in the Taj Mahal, if you see the ground plan of it, and of course that this tendency towards building the tomb complexes entirely out of marble, that started with the Itimaduddaulah's tomb, that came into its full glory in Taj Mahal. Now Taj Mahal is a structure which was built by Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan, and as we know that Taj Mahal is also a structure which is celebrated for Shah Jahan's wife Mumtaz Mahal, but there is more to it than Taj Mahal being a symbol of the love between Shah Jahan and Mumtaz. So we see that in one hand that Taj Mahal is the primarily it was made as the grave or the tomb of Mumtaz Mahal, but also we see, if we follow the career of Shah Jahan and his aspirations for making architecture, then we see that either way Shah Jahan wanted to build an architecture which will symbolize the glory and the power of the Mughals, and to take that further, he claimed that the Hindustan has become the rose garden on earth, and that had happened during the time period of Shah Jahan. So this analogy about garden that came back again and again in how the Mughal rulers, they have implemented this garden planning or the metaphor of the garden in their architectural projects, as well as this in different kinds of this cultural aspects, as well as for planning, the city planning and so on. So what we find to be very specific about the planning of Taj Mahal, that Taj Mahal is a place which also sort of makes a intervention into what is the material world, what is the spiritual world, and here is the entire planning of the site, which is oblong, which is rectangular, and in this one we have the implementation of the Chaharbagh planning at the center. However, we do not really see the tomb complex to be there at the center, but now that is moved to the further north, and that is right beside the river Yamuna. So this is something that is there, and it was made deliberately to have the vista like presence of this monument, which can be seen from the other side of the river. Now if we also follow that what all was there in this entire complex, we see that it is not just the garden and the tomb complex which was part of this entire planning, but there is also this Nahabat Khana, and then there are the other tombs which were of the other Mughal royals. And then right outside of that, if we see this particular area from this satellite image, here we find that the thickly populated bazaar had started. So there is this bazaar which is congested, which is chaotic, and there are many lanes and by-lanes and people and different kinds of hustle and bustle of the city that is going on. And as I have already mentioned, that in the 16th and 17th century, Agra was one of the most populous and prosperous cities in the entire South Asia. So from that hustle and bustle, from the chaos of the city, from the bazaar, then suddenly once you enter into this tomb complex, into this garden complex, then that makes an intervention into the entry from the material world to the spiritual world. And that is something that Shah Jahan had originally imagined, and that is also the reason why Abakok and some of the other art historians, we find them to have claimed that Shah Jahan might have built Taj Mahal either way, whether as a grave for his wife or for other reasons. But his main ambition was to signify the power and the glory of the Mughals, and that is the reason he took this tremendous, this incredible architectural project to replicate the paradisiacal garden on the face of the earth. And that is also something with all these architectural projects, with this beautification, with transforming the land, then Shah Jahan could also claim that how Hindustan has become this rose garden under the rule of Shah Jahan. So some of the issues that we find in Taj Mahal are also, as I have already mentioned, that how there is a there are certain characteristic features of this structure, like the use of the high platform and then those wings in four sides from the central pavilion which were there in Humayun's tomb, and this high imposing dome. All those features we can find them to be already established in the Mughal architecture. And in Taj Mahal there are those four minarets in four corners of this building. So these minarets also, they sort of balance this imposing architecture at the center, which sits in onto this high platform. And so this vertical growth of these minarets, they also make a balance between the central tomb complex and then what is there in the sides. So apart from that, we also have two other architectural complexes in the two sides of Taj Mahal, and that is, one is a place for people to stay there, and another is a mosque. And we have already discussed how a mosque or a prayer hall around the tomb complex is also something that is of high relevance, because there the devotees would offer prayers for the departed soul as well as for during the communal gatherings. So those things to be very much part of the Taj Mahal complex that we find here. Now the other thing that we also have here is the use of this parchinkari or meenakari on stone, and we find that there are different kind of geometric as well as this floral motifs which were brought in, and they were continued as part of this the decoration of the tombs. Now this, as I have already mentioned, that how this idea of this different kind of stonework, for example jali, and then parchinkari or the stone inlay work, and this low relief works on stone, all of them, they come together in the Mughal monument. And then this symbolism of the garden, that also played a very important role if we also see the graves of both Shah Jahan and Mumtaz, for example here. And here in the graves, these are incredibly ornamented, and then they are meticulously made, these graves. And these graves, we do not really have much of inscriptions to praise the Lord or to offer solace and or prayers for their afterlife, but we see there are different kind of motifs of the plants and flowers and creepers. And basically it's also a symbolic representation of a garden within the tomb, and this is the garden of paradise that had been depicted through the visuals in this tomb complex. So in other words, we find that how this idea of the garden, it's not just in the physical space but also as a symbol that came into the imagery that was used in Taj Mahal, and so bringing the philosophy, symbolism, and then the political power of the Mughal, as well as this grand planning which comes from Persian as well as Indian sources. For all those reasons, we find that Taj Mahal to be one of the most celebrated architecture done during the Mughal time period. Thank you.